Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to this episode of Believers Early Chris podcast. As you must know by now, this is your brother Rahul Ali, the El Talent Man. In this episode, we speak to a pharmacist, brother Abdul Malik, and in short, we go into his career story from college to his first role and developing life as a pharmacist pre-COVID and during COVID. What's that's been like, the challenges he's faced. Also stuff like in detail, like how did you navigate certain processes? How did you sort of look at the different placement stuff? How does that sort of work? What does the day-to-day life of a pharmacist look like? What key skills has he developed that are really important to succeed in this sort of career, but also as a person, also as a Muslim? And he speaks a lot about how, as well as his job being really important to me, something that he's wanting to do, and having that kind of good picture of what he wanted to do at an early age, but it's not the be all and end all for him. Like, it goes into, like, as a Muslim, how we have the anchor of our deen, our faith, and how you need to be more than just what your career is. So embracing different experiences, doing different things, and really like getting out there really and enjoying it as well. Like, it's very good example, I think, of how we should approach our careers, how we should just strive, achieve excellence, do our best, but also at the same time not to be overly attached to the outcome, but more so of our intention, of our our means, how are we going about it, and then also again like really emphasizing that adding more to your personality, not just being strictly career focused, but doing more than that, and how that adds value as well, that to your overall character, your experience, the way you talk to different people, the way you understand that, and going to that, why that's important as a Muslim as well, especially if you're going to different professions, that we need to understand the people that we're looking to serve, and also managing that with the people that we're going to be working with. More likely than not aren't going to be the people that we sort of live with in our community, so we've got to know how to switch up and stuff like that. So it's definitely an interesting episode. I think a lot of wisdom from the brother, and we talk about a lot of interesting stuff. So I think, yeah, if you're thinking about or just generally interested in a career in sort of the STEM subjects, and pharmacy being one of them, which I think is very common, then I think this will be very beneficial. And even just generally listening in to how it's been during the COVID period and how it is generally as a pharmacist, I think it should be a really good, interesting insight and listen. And as I always request, please do like, share, and subscribe, and share this again. Like, really emphasize, share this with people, the young Muslims that are out there that are thinking about different career paths, so they can make a better informed career decision. Aside from that, enjoy. So welcome, brother Abdul Malik, to the Believers Early Chris podcast. I know you do your own podcast,
Yeah.
Jollaf after Jummah, so I probably missed
Sure.
out.
Close enough, close enough.
Oh man, no, but it's good to. No, I think someone who's got a bit of experience in podcasting, and someone's also in a career path that I think people will definitely be interested in finding out about, which is you're currently, and correct me if I'm wrong again, but you're a pharmacist by profession,
Yeah, correct.
and we're going to find out about
Yeah.
how that is, especially during this current time. And
Uh,
I have a lot of questions as well, because before, when I used to think of a pharmacist, I used to go to, like, pharmacies to collect my medicine,
yeah.
and I'll go down and I'll see like these people behind the counter, and I'll be thinking, like, why are these people giving each other silent treatment? Because it was so quiet. Everyone would
Yeah.
not talk to each other, and I was just thinking, like, things, it just felt, when I used to go to pharmacies, it feels so off, and I didn't know what it was. I could feel the tension. I was thinking, is this,
There's a reason for
you,
that.
you tell me, you can tell me.
We'll
But
go into
yeah, you can tell, yeah, like, I want to find out, man. Cause I was thinking, like, I can feel the tension sometimes, like, but
that's my intention.
yeah, that's me. That's my observation. But then, as I started to meet people like Brother Ashraf, who's probably eagerly listening to this and smiling right now as he hears us mention his name, I realize there's a lot more to pharmacy than just that. Basically, my view was very narrow and very limited, but that's the point, of this podcast. It's for people that are like me back in a few years ago, had no idea what these sort of careers are like, is to find out what is actually like, what are the sort of different types of, being a pharmacist in different areas and stuff like that. But, before we get into more questions, because I'll be interested to dip into like, how's it going currently with the COVID stuff. I will start with, career journey, a sort of career story. So from like, college to university, how was it for you, and what was your route to getting into this profession?
Okay, cool. First of all, assalamu alaikum. To anyone that's listening, Ashraf as well. I know he's gonna love that shout as well. So for me, obviously, my name is Abdul Malik. In case that was missed, um, for me, pharmacy wasn't always the path. Like I know, I'm sure everybody on this podcast probably comes and says, yeah, it wasn't always the path. It wasn't for me as well. Um, but what I would say is that being a pharmacist is probably not something that if you knew me when I was 15, 16, you probably wouldn't be surprised that this is the kind of thing I ended up in. I think being Nigerian, and I'm sure you can relate, being from your background as well, that the healthcare kind of that kind of sector is very much pushed. Is very much like that. That's the aim. So obviously, it's doctor, dentist, blah 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 blah, and that's the kind of that's the model we all kind of follow. And obviously, we have socioeconomic reasons why our parents push us to those fields, and we don't need to get into that today
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
because that's another podcast in itself. But it was always going to be something healthcare related. And then I have a sister, a big sister as well. Alhamdulillah, she's a dentist. Mashallah, she's doing well. My other sister's in maths, so I was always in that kind of field. And in school, to be fair, my biggest interests were history, maths, and science. Those are my three things. Not physics though. I can't stand physics. And so going into college, obviously, I had that kind of scope. I was thinking I'm going to be in that sector, so it was obviously going to be maths, chemistry, biology, and then I put history there as like a personal interest. And originally, there was a point where, as history seemed kind of like the fun subject, I think I did on the side. There was a bit of a growing passion in for history, which I still have. All types of history, I just think is so interesting.
100%.
The mistakes of the past, the way they get repeated, and you can see the themes. Is very interesting. Mashallah. It's very sick. But those dreams quickly got shot down by the parents because it was like, yeah, what are you gonna do with it? And obviously, to be fair, I think that was what 2013. I think the last 7 years, I think there's been a lot of growth in the mindset of that older generation to see the possibilities in anything. I think maybe those times, I know it's only 7 years ago. It sounds like it's not a long time, but I think mindsets were a bit more narrow back then. And I think things are with social media, blah blah blah, things are changing, which is good. But yeah, so I kind of refocused myself and thinking, oh, I'm gonna do something healthcare related. And I think my original plan was to actually be a dentist. But then the AS level results came, and it wasn't looking too strong. I'll be open there for what I get. I got to be fair, I got A in history, and then maths and history were like my two bankers. But maths it didn't. I think well, maths there's a reason. Maths I missed one of the exams. I used to have migraines back in those times. So I think it's called C2. Basically, the second exam I just basically didn't do it. So I had it. So I got a C, alhamdulillah, which is all right. But it meant that applying for certain things was going to be very difficult. And then chemistry, it just went all wrong. Yeah, that was just I was there. There was no headache, but I don't know. I didn't get a headache, but I had a headache after the exam because it was a strong performance from me.
Bro, I
Um,
can relate so much to that story already. But carry on. There's
yeah,
many parallels there, man. Go and carry on.
yeah. And then what happened? And then biology, I think I got a B, yes, a B. Yeah, so it wasn't terrible, but chemistry, getting a D in chemistry, which is the most important subject for these healthcare courses, meant that things had to be refocused, as it were. So because there was no point. I think one thing I think I could say to myself that I've always been a bit of a realist, which I guess in some ways at that age might have even be a negative thing. Probably you could see it as not the most positive thing, to be fair. So I very much quickly refocused and said, okay, what am I going to do? So it's almost like I said, I'm going to be in this sphere. What kind of thing? I could try and do like the 6 year medicine thing, or I could try and do the pharmacy thing, or a couple of other things, physiotherapy, blah blah blah. But I thought, yeah, let me go for this. I know a couple of guys that you got nice cars. They seem like they're doing all right. They seem happy. let's go for this. I
Yeah.
like because I've never thought my career will define me. So it was almost like a means to an end. I saw school as a means to an end, innit? So I did what I had to do. I made some applications, and even in applying for pharmacy with my predicted grades, that was tough because I had to do a lot of wheeling and dealing to try and boost my predicted grades up a bit, just enough so I could put a decent application in. So, which was we got there in the end. Some teachers made me jump through. Some of the things I had to do for these teachers. I won't get. Yeah. Yeah. So applied for a couple of unis. The uni I went for, I kind of had to apply for. There's a course called Pharmaceutical Sciences, which is kind of like more the industry side of pharmacy. But the entry requirements generally aren't as high. So a lot of the time I had to apply for that, thinking that maybe I could adjust it later and then get my results and try and do a little madness and try and wheel my way into
Yeah, yeah,
pharmacy.
yeah. Yeah.
I'm just applying for a uni called Liverpool John Moores because I support Liverpool, as you can probably see from the badge, and then Kingston because those were the two with the lowest kind of entry requirements for the predicted grades I had because there was no point the UCLs and the King's colleges and there was no point. Um, and I applied for Medway, which is in Kent. It's like a new pharmacy school. They all rejected me. But Liverpool accepted me, but who's going Liverpool? Because I'm in South. Camberwell to Liverpool is not. It's not that. I'm not. I mean, some coming to America free kind of story. So I'm not going. And then next was yeah, Kingston, which was like kind of my banker. I was like, okay, Kingston will accept me near home, stay at home, blah blah blah. Because obviously there's the whole, the finance loan situation that we won't get into as well. That's
Yeah,
another
yeah,
podcast. So,
yeah.
yeah, so it was like I have to stay in London. That was my mind. I had to stay in London. I went to Liverpool just to do a tour of the stadium, to be honest. And then they rejected me, and it was a shock. And they told me, we think you'll be better off doing pharmacology or pharmacy because like a different course, which was crushing. So it was at the point where I was kind of like, I was doing my exams, kind of thinking, boy, I thought like this would be a method for me, but it wouldn't. It was looking tense. Sorry, I'm speaking a lot of slang. Is how I'm
No,
talking
it's
it.
fine, bro. It's fine. We're
Yeah.
speaking in the
Um,
terms of like, how us youngsters
colloquialisms or
understand.
yeah. So alhamdulillah, results they came, and somehow I managed to go above and beyond all expectations and managed to get a good like couple of A's and whatever,
Inshallah.
which is sick, alhamdulillah. And I ended up getting a call and I ended up getting allowed accepted from Medway, the uni I went to. A couple of others as well, like UCL. What was the other one? UCL and I can't remember one. Some in Newcastle or something. They called me. I don't even know how they get your number. Some data stuff,
Data
but yeah,
collection.
I ended up going to Medway, Kingston as well actually. But I said no, I'm not going there after you rejected me. There was a bit of pride there. Yeah, so I ended up going to Medway. So it's like University of Kent essentially to do pharmacy. Which was yeah. So it was like, boy, this is cool. We made it. 'Cause I had that feeling, you're that kind of, we made it. Like, little do you know all that's coming ahead of you. But yeah, we made it. So settling into uni now, we're in uni now. It was kind of, I think, very quickly, just like what you said, I realized that community pharmacy I didn't think was going to be for me. As much as it is, that was my main experience of pharmacy. The fact that I could work in a hospital, I think always appealed to me because that being at that kind of critical stage of a patient's kind of pathway to me was where I felt like I could enrich myself more, get a lot more benefit and get more kind of appreciation for my job. Do you know what I mean? Rather than being at the back end of it, which isn't a problem, the primary care, because what I've learned is that those people, especially if they do it right, those community pharmacists can be major, major, major figures in their community, and there's a lot of benefit in that as well. So,
Mm.
not to kind of get at them as well. Um, but yeah, I kind of very much quickly realized what I wanted to do, and it's funny that the job I do now, literally the job I did a year ago, essentially. When I wrote, in uni, you have these portfolio, personal development plan type things. In my very first one, I said, oh, what do you want to do at the end of uni? I said, I want to do this job in this place. And the chances of that are like 1 in 1,000. And essentially, is that I wanted to work in this hospital, the one that I was born in, that's like down the road from my house, King's College. Alhamdulillah, that's what I ended up doing in it. I'm kind of giving a spoiler for the end of the story, but it's a bit, and it was very much a pipe dream at the time, but alhamdulillah,
Alhamdulillah.
things happen. Yeah. So going through uni, to be fair, uni wasn't that controversial in terms of what I wanted to do. It was more just the base, a thing of, do I want to kind of go into the more business side of things very early on? Do I want to do the like industry pharmaceutical company type thing, or do I want to kind of get a grounding in a what we call clinical grounding and kind of learn the basics and do that patient pace and stuff and blah blah blah. And that's the kind of road I ended up going down. And I can say that literally since then, since uni, like everything I've kind of alhamdulillah so far. And inshallah this continues, but generally everything I've wanted to do
Sure.
has Allah made it easy for me and it's happened. So it's gonna kind of straight path and ended up doing my training. We call it pre-reg before you have to do an exam at King's College Hospital. And then I in the middle of that got a job there and was allowed to stay, alhamdulillah, and I'm still there to this day and that's what I'm doing. So that's a brief, not very brief story of of my career up to now.
Nah, that's interesting, bro. That's what I like, and maybe you might be the first one, but you sort of knew where you were heading from, like
Mm.
even like college onwards, where you knew you were gonna apply for. You went for the different universities, even though you chose Liverpool John Moore because you support Liverpool, and then when you actually got the offer, you thought the dream was over. They're just there for the stadium tour, but you still, you know, you had that kind of picture already, which
Mm.
is very interesting because for myself, that picture was very unclear, and I think for many, that picture is also like very unclear because I think everything you said up until the point of applying for university. So, sort of like you, I did exact same subjects. I think maths, biology, chemistry, and history. Um,
Uh,
and it was funny because I know you mentioned right at the beginning where you're so interested in maybe dentistry. Everyone in that class, when they were asked what they want to do, it was like medicine, 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 dentistry, medicine, medicine, dentistry. And I also said medicine because that's what the Asian dream was, and as we know from our backgrounds, and chemistry was absolute myth, and I dropped out. First person to drop out the whole chemistry, out the whole class. I didn't even get to the
it's
first year,
hard.
bro. I finished I left it in January before that exam, and that dream halas was finished. And I did an extra year in short bro because everything C2 like you. I mean, you were unwell, so you couldn't do it. C2, I think it might be the same year that you done it. I think we might be the same age. Um, that paper they changed to logarithms, and I was ready for everything else, but every question seemed to have logarithms in it, and that's one thing I wasn't ready
Yeah,
for at all. And I literally that
yeah.
paper was an absolute mess. Failed completely.
Mess.
If I at least got a pass, like even like the small lowest pass, even if I got like E or D in that paper, I would have got a B in maths basically. But that you brought it down to like a D, and I thought
Do you remember exam solutions? I know everyone was on that at the
that
time.
was my
That,
thing,
that guy,
man.
that guy, I need to shake his hand, man.
I wonder. Yeah, yeah. I do wonder. Is it still up and running? I want to know what that guy is. That was a lifesaver. Honestly,
He was a guy.
that
I
that
love
was
that guy, man.
the thing that saved my life. And that and past papers. That was my method of doing it. And I think because they changed the paper last minute, what I used to do, I used to predict.
Yeah, I think it wasn't the same year
Yeah,
then. I think it wasn't. Yeah, I remember that change paper last minute thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
I used to predict the papers. And I used to like look at the past questions, and I used to get a good picture of what would come up. That's how I would do it. And because they changed it, all that work I did to focus it, was like
Checked.
just out
Yeah.
the window, man. It was gone. But no, alhamdulillah, man. Going back to your story, forget mine. The pharmacy stuff. So when you're looking at the different areas, 'cause you must have been when you started doing that degree. I know you had an idea of what you wanted to get into, which is that sort of hospital related stuff. But did you sort of weigh up the other options and kind of evaluate that, or were you sort of fixed on where you wanted to go, or have you even thought about maybe because it's switching and the other one, and what would be like the pros and cons in case anyone's listening to this and thinking I might be interested in these sort of other ones? It'd be sort of good to get your views on that.
Mm. So I think typically the kind of brothers would tend, like let's say, and probably generally men as well, that kind of community pharmacy side of things is generally probably where you'd be most comfortable. And I say that because, and just to caveat everything, I basically did placements or some kind of experience in everything. So every sector by the time I was in second year of uni, I'd experienced all of them to a good level. And I also have a few friends of friends or brothers from a Moscow, that type of things that are in one of these fields. So I kind of had a good picture. And going back, so the community kind of sector, so that's your kind of Boots pharmacy. If I say community, what I mean is like your pharmacist on the high street type thing. So your Boots, your Lloyds, your Superdrug, that's community. If I say hospital, and if I say industry, what I mean by industry is your GSK, AstraZeneca making the COVID vaccine, those type of people, or whatever's in
Yeah,
that sphere. So kind of three main. There's more, but main sectors, and those are the ones I was aware of at the time anyway. Um, and when it comes to community, you get that you have that ownership. So generally, if you're in a pharmacy, you're generally most likely to be managing that shop, and you're the person in charge. You're the top dog, and you're often the only pharmacist. So you're very autonomous. But you also have to manage quite, junior staff with the ones the counter assistant, the person, the dispenser, the person who's kind of putting the labels on the boxes, checking everything, blah blah blah. So, but as you saw, at that dynamic, three people in a small little strip. If those three people aren't the right three people, that is gonna, and you're working what 12 hours. That is that. is, yeah, but not to, but it can be so rewarding. And imagine those three people are the right three people. Like I remember there's a pharmacy I did a placement in. It was in Peckham, was it Crystal Pharmacy. I'll give them a shout out. And it's the owner Muslim. I did a placement first year of uni. His name's Muslim. They're all brothers. It was Muslim. I think one other brother was called Bilal. Then a couple of counter guys, just other brothers, and that was beautiful. Alhamdulillah. It was like Dhuhr time comes, you kind of put the shutters down, everyone prays together. It's just proper, like, do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like, man, it's so sick. And just going there, obviously they didn't automatically assume I was going to be Muslim and that, and then just being able to good to see, I could see myself happily working there for whatever, and it was comfortable, it was nice. Islam's not compromised. It's beautiful. So you can get both. You can get both, and a lot of the time, you as the pharmacist, the manager, will kind of have a lot of say. You can control a lot of these things. You're probably doing the hiring, the firing, the blah blah blah. And also at the same time, you've got that community feel. You get used to people in your community. You're the guy that people need. If someone needs a passport photo signed, I mean, you're the guy, like, you're the community figure and all the things that come with it. There's so much like possible, baraka that comes in that as well, and it's it. Um, but with the hospital, I think for me it was more the fact that it can be ever changing, so you can see everything. Especially the bigger hospital you get, the more variety you get. So I, for example, work as a hepatology, like, specializing pharmacist. So I work within liver, and just being in that, there's just so much. Do you know what I mean? There's so much different things that you experience, and so much kind of insight you get that you never thought you'd get into uni, that you'd be working with, senior professors of liver sciences in blah, blah, blah. There's just so much different things going on. And also within it, there's so much different types of jobs you can do. So with COVID, there's specific, like, for example, a lot of pharmacists are becoming intensive care specializing pharmacists, that never thought they would. There's procurement, there's just kind of the corporate side of things as well. There's just so much going on with it that we'll probably get into later when I kind of tell you about what I'm specifically doing right
yeah,
now. That I kind of thought that's the good place to start.
yeah. No, mashallah, that's good, solid insight there. Definitely educated me as well. No, it's interesting about the community ones as well, because as I mentioned earlier, when I sort of said, when I go to like one of these pharmacies, local ones, and it just felt so silent and felt so weird that I couldn't quite understand what was going on. Like, it just felt like everyone was giving each other silent treatment. Is there a specific reason for that? Is it just maybe the wrong people together, or
Literally, it could be the wrong combination of people, and also just being in the pressure, like, especially where you are. If you've got 100 people screaming at you all day, which can be like in a pharmacy, you just obviously it can just beat you down a bit. And a lot of the time as well, the pharmacist there isn't so. Like me, I work in community quite a lot, just as, like, it's called locum. Probably you can do locum in different jobs, so like just like a 1 day shift kind of covering. And with that, you're very much there for 1 day. You're a bit like a mercenary. There's no point. There's no point becoming everyone's best friend. There's no point. They don't know you. Do you know what I mean? So, and a lot of time it might just be two people. You just, do you know what I mean? You just do what you got to do, and go. And it can sometimes be like that, which is not the best kind of advert for people who shouldn't go somewhere and not make an effort to kind of assimilate with the people there. But sometimes in life, life is life, and sometimes it could be a bit difficult. But yeah, that pharmacy, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know.
it might just be
Maybe the
that one?
heat was broken. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so again, sort of to summarize, like, in terms of the university journey, so you pick the subject. Is it a sort of 3 year thing at uni and then something additional? What's like that structure?
So you do 4 years at university, and then you leave with a master's. So it's like you don't do 3 years then a master's. Everyone just does 4 years, and it's actually changing now. To be fair, it's actually going to change in about 2 years. But yeah, whatever. And back in my day anyway. So it was 4 years, and then you apply it in your at the end of your third year or the beginning of your fourth year. It's a bit like kind of going through UCAS again. You apply for a pre-reg, and the way that system is very similar. I don't know if you've had a doctor. I don't think you've had a doctor, but it's very similar to. It's literally the same process as applying for like your F1, like your training year. Whereas the only difference, I guess, between I don't know, like for example, like medicine and pharmacy would be that there's a lot more onus on what
Yeah.
sector you choose. So you can generally only really work in community hospital, and now I guess there's the GP kind of working in a GP practice type thing is increasing, which is more community similar. But based on what you pick there, it can be hard to move sector once you've started. So once you've kind of done your pre-reg, you're very much in that field, but you can cross over, and the earlier you do it, the better. But it's more difficult, and it's easier to go from hospital to community than to go from community to hospital, because they do carry a lot. The skill set is very different, so it can be difficult to switch over. So if you're saying I want to do a hospital pre-reg, you kind of have to do a lot of things to make sure that you're in a good position, like placements, etc., to be in a good position to get a hospital pre-reg. And now it's all a centralized application process, so I guess it's a bit more easy. I guess before you had to kind of, it was about who you knew. This uni is friends with this hospital and blah blah blah. But I guess now it's all centralized. It's a lot easier to just go wherever you want. But yeah, so it's very much do your pre-reg, yeah, and then you learn on the job as you work. So you kind of work for them, but you also do your revision. You take your exam in about June time, and inshallah you pass. You become qualified pharmacist,
Yeah.
and then you can work wherever you want.
Now, we'll get into
That's
like the placement stuff as well, and some advice um, on that. But if somebody asked you, so we're going to get to like the before pre-COVID and sort of the normal, so to speak. We don't know what that's going to be now because everyone keeps saying the new normal. Yeah, but that's a whole philosophical
normal.
discussion. So if someone's ask you, what does a pharmacist do, or like what do you do as a pharmacist? How would you sort of summarize that to like a lay person?
Okay, so if I scale it back and say like the basic job, like the your bread and butter, um, as a pharmacist, your job in a hospital, because it is different, but your job in a hospital is to ensure that whatever area you're covering, which is most likely to be a ward or an intensive care unit or whatever, has got an ample supply of medication, and the use of the medicines that they're using are safe and appropriate. That's your main job. So make sure that the drugs are available and the use of them is safe and appropriate. And that's from the prescribing of it, so that it's prescribed correctly, all the way to the administration of it by the nurses, that it's administered correctly. So if I add a bit more meat to that, so that would be generally coming onto a ward, ensuring that the thing, everybody's drug chart. So now, alhamdulillah, a lot of the time it's electronic, so you can see what all the patients are on. Oh, sorry, I missed the major thing as well. Sorry, and also to ensure that the kind of therapy or whatever the patient was on before. So kind of it's called a reconciliation. So whatever the patient was on before, you know exactly what they're on, and the plan for whatever they were on before has been kind of made and it's appropriate. So if you was, I don't know, you have high blood pressure and you came in because you had low high blood sugar, that doesn't mean that your blood pressure is not high anymore. So you can't just ignore that. So that still has to be dealt with. So it may be that there's an appropriate reason. So for sometimes somebody may come in and the reason they've come in is because of their medicines, and you're kind of the best person to know that. So in that case, it would be stop. But a lot of the time it's don't just stop this, restart this, or no, we shouldn't keep this going because look at their blood, their sodium's this, and it's going to affect this. Let's change this. So it's kind of just making sure that the use that what they were on before is accurately documented and dealt with appropriately, and then making sure that the active therapy for what they're in now is being optimized. So you're not given too lower dose of this antibiotic. You're given the right dose. This interacts with this, and there's so many nuances that come with that. And that's why I guess you're the drug expert. So you just have to kind of make sure that that's all done
Yeah,
appropriately.
because
There's
I
different ways to do
imagine
it.
like so many different medications, so many different factors taken into account. Like you've really got to like look at it by case basis and all the little nuances. Everyone's
Yeah.
uniquely.
Whereas the drug is absorbed, like have they even got a colon? Do you need to change it because this one's absorbed in the stomach, not the small intestine? There's so many little different things that you have to be in place to advise on and ensure that it's done properly. Because bless the MD, the doctors and nurses, it can be difficult. Sometimes you know what you want to do and you think this will work, but then you haven't thought of the everything, and it's difficult to do so, which is why pharmacists are there, because it's to stop errors and ensure that medicine, which is the main way that people treat people. Like, not everybody gets surgery. Uh, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? The main therapy that's delivered to people is medicine. It's the best way. It's the most common way that people are treated. So it needs to be used correctly
Mm.
and it needs to be done correctly. So that's I guess in essence what we kind of do as a day job, as
That's
the bread and
interesting because
butter.
yeah,
But
there must
yeah,
be a lot of like pressures doctors and nurses are facing. So it's vital basically. Innit? It could be sometimes it could probably be the difference between life and death if the details or factors aren't taken into account. Um, if you were to sort of describe, and this is again, we're going to now go into like pre-COVID and now during COVID. What does a typical day or week look like for a pharmacist pre-COVID? How would you describe that?
so pre So it very much once again depends on what you're doing. So within the hospital, so the different kind of job roles. So let's say let's say when I first started, my first job would have been a few hours as kind of getting experience on a ward, doing the things I just kind of mentioned. That would be maybe 2 to 4 hours, and then you could be, for example, in the afternoons in the hospital dispensary. So there you could be, I don't know if sometimes, if you go to hospital, sometimes they have pharmacies within the hospital that are a bit similar to like the boot style type thing. You could be in that zone, but there you're kind of doing things similar to what's done in a like boot super drug type thing, but you've got a lot more information, and the pressure that you're under to make the right kind of clinical decisions is more, because you have access to the blood results, the full notes of what's happened, the full case, and you have more scope to make changes because you're all in the same building. The doctors, the nurses, everyone is in the same building. So you're doing that. It's also kind of managing the actually physically checking medicines, which is kind of like what pharmacists are synonymous with. Like, the prescription says paracetamol. Is this paracetamol in the box? Does the label say paracetamol? And it says the right person's name on it. Sign, go, class. That's good. That doesn't change in the hospital. That process still is very much important. Very much has to run. Then there's also kind of like what we call clinical screening. So clinical screening is that thing about making sure the meds are appropriate and accurate for use and blah blah blah. And there's so many different ways that people get medicines in hospitals. For example, like chemotherapy, um, like people with or what we call like rheumatoid conditions, so people with conditions of like immunological disorders, and all of those people come in, for example, to the hospital to get medicines given to them, and all medicines have to go through that same process. Whether it's a patient that's on 10 meds in a hospital bed, or if it's somebody who walks into the hospital to get something and comes out, every medicine has to go through that process before it goes to a patient and before we supply it. So so there's a lot of people kind of sitting down, going through all of that information, making sure that things are safe and effective, and getting it out. So that's kind of like, and a lot of that is done by the kind of junior pharmacists. And as you go more senior, you can kind of go into the more managerial side of things. So just before COVID, it's weird for me because I was a junior and stopped being a junior in COVID. So I got my like not junior anymore job in March, and that was literally when we went into the proper lockdown and when the first spike happened. So I got my job title is that I'm the kind of lead for private patients at King's College. So I kind of make sure that whole private patient sector runs all right and runs smoothly from the pharmacy side, which obviously involves interacting with the whole private patient division, that kind of team. But most of our patients are Arabs from abroad, but they weren't allowed to fly to the country anymore. So that kind of that, and there's a ward, like the private ward, for example, shut down. It completely shut down. So I kind of got a job, and if I was in like a corporate sphere, I would almost have probably been made redundant because my job didn't exist anymore because there were no private patients. So I'm the private patient lead, but I have no private patients. So I kind of moved more into the liver side of things. Or that's just to be fair, in the first wave, I did something completely different, which I can get into, but then ended up moving into the liver hepatology side of things. So I said I'd become a hepatology pharmacist, but I never applied for hepatology. But because I sit in the office with them, I ended up doing what they do essentially, amongst other things. But yeah, I think I kind of summarized it.
No, it's good.
It's really difficult to because there's different different jobs. Like I don't even know the jobs that so many people do, and I've been working it 3 years. There's so many people. Like, what do you actually do? I don't actually know. There's so many. Yeah, it can become very corporate the more senior you go, and the more
Yeah, I can
organizational
imagine.
and
At what point
yeah.
did you meet Ashraf?
I met Ashraf. So working at the trust that I did my pre-reg at, so my training year at, has two hospitals. One's near my house. This is another funny. Actually, I honestly remember when I said nothing's ever gone wrong. So when I thought I was applying for the hospital that was down the road from my house, what I didn't realize was that half of the placement, half of the year was at that hospital, but the other half of it was in Kent. so back to Kent, I was commuting, so that was annoying. But yeah, so Ashraf was doing his remember when I said that was kind of your junior, so he's like the year above me, so there's like your junior years. So he was doing his first year of qualification, doing all of that, running around junior stuff when I was a trainee. So then when I went there halfway through the year, obviously you're naturally going to be drawn to the brothers. You want to know where am I going to pray, where am I going to all this. So there's a couple of brothers there. Ashraf was one of them, and that's how I linked up with him. And then I think later on in that year, he got his big boy job, and he moved to the site that we're at. So when I came back, we together full time reunited at last, and alhamdulillah. So yeah,
Sick,
so that's how I
alhamdulillah.
met him.
So how, I guess during this now, this is probably the quite interesting insight now. Not that it's not been interesting before, but I think during this, like,
Yeah. Cheers.
just dismiss all that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's get to like the real stuff. How has it been during this COVID time? And like, have you still, are you still doing this sort of role? Are you like in intensive care area? Like, what's been happening in terms of your role?
So I've never been one of the people drafted into intensive care. But within liver, I kind of work in there's we have because it's a liver specialized hospital, we have a liver intensive care unit that must kind of at all costs be immune from COVID. Like COVID needs to stay far from away from it. But that's neither here or there. In the first my first kind of wave experience and my second wave experience were quite different. In the first wave, I was very much in the this is weird, I was in the very much in the thick of it. So the we went into like the spike. I had like got married like 2 weeks before, alhamdulillah. So it was like cool living life, living in a bubble. So like obviously honeymoon and all that got cancelled, but that's the story. You can check that on my podcast. I tell that story. So I've come back into the hospital and it's a complete horror show. And all of the kind of remember when I said there's so many different jobs, people do this, people do this, all of that scrapped. So everything was the intensive care units. It was either if you're not on a ward making sure that things are good, then you must be off a ward making sure that the supply of all these intensive care medicines, which were in national shortage at the time, or global shortage at the time, because yeah, were achieved. So you're calling manufacturers in Latvia to try and get this dodgy supply of this medicine because the main suppliers are not. So there was people doing that, and then there's people doing the ward stuff. My job was so remember when I said the private ward closed. So what the private ward was actually good because it's obviously it's almost like a hotel type. Obviously it's nicer than a normal ward. So all the rooms are like individual and they all have their own air supply. And what that was very good for would is it made it a good place for having COVID patients and non-COVID patients together, but without risking giving the non-COVID patients COVID-19. So it kind of became like a if you're if you go to A&E and we need to admit you before you go into a normal ward, you have to come here until we find out your COVID status, your swab, and find out if you're positive or negative, and then ship you off to wherever's appropriate. And that obviously was a madhouse because that was basically like A&E. It's basically essentially it was like people are there for a few seconds, then go. And what was risky about that place is because it was so hectic. There was people coming in, for example, that oh I've got a bit of a cough, for example, but 3 days before I had a heart attack and I'm an epileptic, and if I don't get my epileptic medicines, then I have a seizure and I can die. So remember that process I said about making sure that you know what everybody what's going on with everybody and what their situation is, and making sure that everything's prescribed and properly, and that's all catered for. Within the midst of COVID, it was kind of like making sure that all of that happened and making sure that the treatment you were given, so like your all these dexamethasone, remdesivir, this is all at the time that all these different medicines or this can treat COVID, was all going on, making sure that that's all being done appropriately. So I was very much running around like a headless chicken on that ward, literally it's mad because not just my normal face mask. Now you've got all of these special masks and special FFP3 and blah blah blah. But it was before all of that was there, so I was literally just kind of in the thick of it. Yeah, I kind of talking to those patients in the ward and the scrubbed up with the doctors, kind of making sure that everything was safe. And yeah, so that was my first kind of experience. And also at that period, generally, unless it was ITU, pharmacists were kind of doing everything remotely, which is very possible. Obviously, it's not the best, but you can do it remotely. You can do it from not on the ward, but I was on the ward because that one, it needed
Yeah.
special attention. Lockdown 2 for me has been different in that I've kind of gone more into the operational side of things. So I've kind of gone into either working on just a normal COVID ward or kind of doing. So we had an incident where our fridge, one of our fridges went, and a lot of the specialist intensive care medicines are like fridge medicines. So like this is very much a, if we don't sort this out, people will die and it will be our fault type of situation. And I was very much involved with kind of the processing of that and getting the medicines either into the hospital or helping getting the medicines into the hospital or doing what he needed. It's kind of hard to explain, but doing what he needed to make sure that the medicines that were compromised were safe to use effectively and kind of stop rotation. But yeah, so that's kind of what I was doing in the second wave. And then now I'm just kind of back to my day job. I'm on a COVID ward, but on a COVID liver ward. So it's not intensive care COVID. It's just these people are positive. So then, inshallah, most of them aren't
Oh.
dying with COVID.
So
So yeah,
have you
that's
like
kind of what I'm.
managed to stay COVID free?
So I did an antibody test in March and it was positive, which indicates that I probably had it in January or February or something. So, do you know what I mean? So the tests aren't 100%, but I think I must have had it early. And I don't think I've had a few negative swabs since. So since it became kind of the mainstream virus, I
Yeah.
haven't had it. Alhamdulillah.
Like yeah.
That doesn't mean I can't get it again though, because I know people. Yes, well, I can, but I haven't.
No,
Alhamdulillah,
no, I had a
to
test
my
like
knowledge
a few
anyway.
months back and I had it, but alhamdulillah, it was okay. Like in terms of like the symptoms, it was very minor in comparison to what people are facing. So alhamdulillah, for that man. But
Alhamdulillah.
bro, have you been managing these challenges? Because one of the things I sort of ask is what challenges have you faced? But it sounds like every day is a challenge, man. What's your mindset? How do you like deal with it? Like setbacks or stuff like that. How do you get around it?
I think you always have to kind of just focus on. So I remember, I think I said earlier that I don't like to see my job as everything, which I think can be. I think for a lot of people anyway, it can be that can be a key to staying stress free. So making sure that the rest of your life doesn't shut down, I think is important. So that escapism, I think, is really important. And when it comes to setbacks at work, I think you just kind of have to almost like just sometimes you got to just when it gets bad or when things go negative, you kind of just got to see it as like this is the game. Like, yeah, how many movies have we watched? You know what I mean? No, I know life's not a movie, but how many like sometimes like not everything. Who when you read their story, like think Prophet Muhammad, any Sahaba, any I don't know, Malcolm X, Brad Pitt, no one's story is gonna be like just the trajectory is just gonna be super. So there's no reason for you to expect that everything in my life is just going to go easy and fine. So you just got to, I know it's easier said than done, but kind of just roll with it. So alhamdulillah, and I'm saying that from probably a position of privilege where not too much has probably gone wrong career-wise for me. Not that I'm where I want to be and not that there's things I couldn't have done, but generally not too much has gone wrong. But I think I like to think I'm prepared. And obviously I've had a few setbacks for but I've tried to get a job recently and got told I wasn't experienced enough. Alhamdulillah, that's all right. Next time I'll be more experienced. You know what I mean? It's just you just gotta try and roll with it as much as you can, and also just make sure that you know there's more strings to your bow. Don't let your career be the only thing that's going for you in your life because you're not hiding to nothing if you're doing that. So yeah, try and
Yeah.
branch out as much as you can and experience as much as you can as well before you start your career if you can because that will give you big perspective.
100%.
Yeah.
And
So
I
yeah.
like that example. Every like you think about those Marvel, DC superhero films, you see like every sort of superhero story, they go through that point in the story where they have that setback, that defeat, the big L,
Firstly,
and
yeah.
then they come back, they train, they get better, and they win at the end. That's like that literally summarizes it. And I think yeah, we can sort of take not everything from it, but you can sort of take the whole underlying theme that you know you're gonna face setbacks, but how you react to it is going to be what defines it. And I think the other point you mentioned, which on episode 2 I spoke to Mohammed Faris, and he mentioned about this article about workism and how religion has become the new has work has become the new religion for people, because when you talk to someone, is that what's like the first sort of thing people ask? What do you do? What's your job title? That sort of becomes the identity, that the life becomes centered around it, like your family life, all that stuff, like it works around work. And even dare I say, sometimes you have to schedule your salah around work. And he goes, that's because, like, if you read the article, things the Washington Post or something like that, it's very interesting. And he goes, as Muslims, and I think you probably relate to this a lot, we have to view it from a wider lens, a more of a barakah lens, that this is a part of our life, but we got our family they have rights on us, our community has rights on us, our body has rights on us. So when you think how much Islam tells us to develop in different areas holistically, then if we do that right, then we wouldn't be too drawn just to our work. Basically, it could be aligned, but it won't be the
exactly. It's a means. It's not you. It's a means. That's what your job essentially
is. It's a title at the end of it. A title can go.
Yeah. And they will replace you. I've always said, like, if you fall down, and although we pray this does happen, but if I fell down, I will be replaced. So do you know what I mean? So think about it like that. Just
that's important as well. I think that people forget that the element of actually enjoying what you do. Cause I actually spoke to like a few brothers when I was starting my career out, and a lot of them, when I spoke to them, they didn't seem like they enjoyed it. And one brother said to me, that's just the way it is. You'll never find a job you enjoy. But I didn't ever. I was like, nah, man. I was like, nah, that's you, bro. You believe that, and that's you're gonna be bound by that. But alhamdulillah, I stuck to it, and I eventually got into roles I've started to really enjoy. That's what makes it worthwhile as well, because you don't want to be spending most of your life doing something that you don't actually enjoy, man. What our time is limited already, man. We can't be doing that.
At all. I 100% agree with that, man.
But I think the next sort of things I had in mind was, like, I imagine everyone that's entering a career and stuff like that, it's a journey of sort of growth and development. What sort of, I guess, key skills and sort of knowledge do you think you developed that you can also apply to like day-to-day life from your career so far?
I think, this is one of the questions I remember. I actually did a bit of thinking for this one. No, not that I didn't think for the others, but I think the compassion is a key skill. So working in a hospital, if you can't gain a bit of compassion and empathy and sympathy for people working around death, then I don't know where you're going to get it from. So that key skill, because I think it's easy to, let's say I work in an area where a lot of my patients, for example, it's their lifestyle that has got them where they are. So it's drinking, and it's illicit drugs, needles, that type of things, giving them all these viruses and conditions. And from the outset, you think of it as these people, these drunks, these druggies, but then when you like just read a note, like just read somebody's patient notes or something, or speak to them, you realize that behind every story is a person, and with every person, there's not many people who wake up and decide that I'm gonna ruin my life, or I'm gonna have a horrible life, I'm gonna be an evil person. Very rare. So people's circumstances often sadly dictate who they are, especially when they don't have that kind of anchor like Islam that we have, alhamdulillah, that kind of brings them back to somewhere. So I think learning that job, just seeing the world from the perspective of everybody's got a story, and there's judgment is a disease. So being a judgmental person is a sickness that's on you. It's not something that's good, because like I said before, when it goes back to everybody's story, if you judge everybody by their beginning, then if everybody was judged by their beginning, then boy. so if there's anything we can learn from just being Muslims, that you never take a snapshot of somebody at that point of time and pigeonhole them and assume that that's what they are. Always look at it holistically, because you'll make you a better person. It'll make you a more understanding person, and it'll mean that you have more to give as well. Because if you can take those stories, take those things, take those little nuances from people's life, it gives you kind of pearls that you can you can share with others. So I think being in that type of job is just giving you insight into how people can benefit their lives and how people can kind of ruin their lives, and can obviously working with kids and something that I kind of do a lot. That is a key skill that I was my job has given me a good insight into that and helped me to be able to deliver kind of better advice and better kind of empathy and sympathy to other people. Um,
That's
as well as that, yeah. To be fair, I think that's the main one. Yeah,
no. I think that's I deep it from like different angles. Though it's like you've probably seen it as well. Like when you got Muslim Twitter and social media, how so quick we are to judge people and label people by maybe something they misperceived or maybe something they said wrongly, and the way they can get attacked, put down, painted wrongly for like a mistake. And there's a lot of young people as well that are trying to figure themselves out, trying to understand Islam and trying to go on the journey. But we could become, or I've seen it like in that space, how it can become very toxic and very judgmental. Like
yeah,
one
very.
mistake, and even like to an extent, you can see it in cultures as well, where so they will remember you for like the mistake and not where you might be a few years down the line. And I think like one of the things with Islam as well coming into it and being the anchor and it being holistic, it's also a journey as well that people go on that journey of discovery. Like, you know, Allah knows we're gonna sin, Allah knows we're gonna make mistakes, but what does He say? Repent and become closer.
Repair.
So it's inevitable that we will make mistakes. It's inevitable that we will get things wrong, but it's going back to that sort of anchor that you mentioned. But I think generally for people that are around them, like whether it's young Muslims or anyone in even professional careers, that compassion element and understanding that where this person is right now or where this person was a few years isn't where they're going to be going forward. There's
Exactly.
scope for change, and
Exactly.
we've seen it in the stories when the Sahaba,
Exactly.
it,
Look at Umar.
yeah, bro, that,
Biggest enemy of Islam became the biggest advocate. So, do you know what I mean? There you
yeah,
go.
and I think that skill, like, even if it's like a soft skill, but it's important to keep in mind that bigger picture when you're talking to anyone, when you're advising anyone, when you're thinking to judge anyone, or like even like sometimes it can be challenging. Sometimes it might just come to your mind, maybe shit on WhatsApp or whatever. But it's going back and thinking, this person's on their journey. What can I do to
Mm.
maybe just be compassionate and help them, encourage them, rather than put them down and make them feel worse?
Exactly.
So
Exactly. And you don't know the power you have in someone's life as well, man. You don't know what part you're going to play in that story. And you don't want it to be a big part and a negatively big part. You don't want that because that's on your 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 and
yeah,
that's on your book. And just another thing I wanted to add was also is more of a practical one, that dealing with, it's a weird setting because I work in a, obviously Camberwell is quite an urban kind of area, and we are working in an urban kind of Afro-Caribbean heavily dominated area, whereas the workforce are mainly kind of a lot of the time kind of privately educated, kind of white Asian women. Essentially that's basically my department, especially from the clinical side. And then whereas when you get to the kind of, you go to the procurement, like the basement or the dispensary side of things, and more the people and the lower skilled job type things, they're often people kind of from the area. So it's very much like, and I'm somebody, I would class myself as being from there. Like those are like my aunties and uncles type people, or do you know what
yeah,
I mean, like Babaji, all of those people. Do you know what I mean? And then whereas when you go upstairs or you go to the offices and you're working with the complete other side of life, and it's kind of like, so me, I always find myself more comfortable in the kind of working in that kind of lower skilled area. That's why I really enjoyed being a junior when I was working in the dispensary, because it was like being with family kind of. But just not being able to navigate both, which is a very, very, very key skill, I think, as anyone, especially if you're kind of growing up in a more kind of, if you're like from the South Londons, or you're from the Barkings, those type, any area where it's like Mandemi type areas. If you're in that type and you're, that's kind of like you being able to navigate both. It's not it gives, I would say, even gives you an advantage if you're able to do both. It's an advantage because people love it, but then in certain ways. So it's about knowing how to use that to your advantage, which is a skill. I think probably easier for brothers, not gonna lie, easier for men, but it is a skill that it shouldn't be underestimated, because your speech can is powerful. You can get yourself, you can open a lot of doors, being able to kind of navigate people. People skills are
Yeah,
vital, and there's so many different types of people. So if you can have all the types of people in one area, which my job, alhamdulillah, kind of gives me, a lot of jobs do as well, then you're
yeah,
good.
no,
If you're on the top floor and you're comfortable in the basement, then yes, that's a good
yeah,
sign.
yeah. You know, into that switch code, but not
Switch it
lose
up.
yourself in terms of like be clear sign
Exactly. Yeah.
different, so we don't want.
Say that. But yeah, good. Thanks for that. Don't lose yourself in doing it as well. Don't be
But
fake.
that leads me on to like
Be-
nice into like a point I had about what do you feel in terms of like because you're kind of navigating both sides of it. So in terms of having the importance of the Muslims being in these areas, how sort of important do you think that is in these sort of roles? Whether it might be more important to the community because they can maybe relate more, but in terms of the hospital stuff, like in terms of the diversity element, what do you think about that?
I think it's essential just in that there's so many. So when it comes to, for example, healthcare in itself, you get a lot of cases where there's a lot of. I'm trying to think of an example where a basic example is, for example, a lot of people, rightly or wrongly, may not want a certain medication because of a religious reason. For example, like I don't know, maybe this medicine's got gelatin in it, so they don't want it. Cool. Wherever you fall on that side, cool. That might be that person's stance, and that's fine. And obviously, in a sports setting, no one can force you. They have to accept that. That person may be not without knowing really be compromising their chances of a positive health outcome. And one thing often that happens is with these people, they may not be the best at communicating these things. So what you end up getting is situations where you've got somebody who's completely ignorant to all of this. Like let's say, I don't know, you're this consultant who's completely ignorant to all of this, and he is just hearing this, and to him it just sounds like hogwash. And the person who's communicating it to him is not able to communicate it, whether because he's too sick or because he doesn't have the ability to communicate it. He's just telling them this, and it creates those little things like that can create massive negative impressions on on those kind of cultures and communities, and it can just be that small little transaction. And it's important that people who can relate to all of these type of people are in positions because these people and these views and all these types of things need to be represented. Not even if it's not even if it's not defending him or agreeing with him, but just to be able to eloquently portray that side, that point of view, to the point where it doesn't leave a negative, taste in the mouth. And not that those people are innocent in that. Why would you have a negative? That's his belief. You shouldn't be, negative. It shouldn't give you a negative view of that person or that community. But that's the nature of people. It is like that. So having people like Muslims, for example, in these sectors, it's vital. It's vital. Having people, senior people in the department who stop the meeting or leave the meeting to go out and pray will empower the person at the bottom to be able to go out and pray, and means that that culture can be delivered. So it's important that we kind of put ourselves in all these type
Yeah,
of places because we need to educate and we need to normalize everything that we do because it's for our own benefit as Muslims. It's essential and it will empower us.
no,
Yeah.
definitely. And do you feel like this the sort of role you're in? Do you find it suits the lifestyle of a Muslim? Being to pray and stuff like that. Have you like has it been fine in that sense? Because I know there's a lot of sort of Muslims in this sort of profession, so that must also help as well. I mean, people like Ashraf, who I keep
Yeah.
giving a shout out to, but
I-
just
It's loving it. I think, alhamdulillah, it does. In a hospital, definitely. In a community setting, depends. It depends. Like I said, you're the boss, but then, for example, if you've got a toilet, a little kitchen, and a strip, where are you praying? Are you praying maybe outside? A lot of the times, the business can't run if you're not there physically, which obviously has to happen. It means that you have to close for 5 minutes because praying is more important. But being realistic, a lot of people may not have their man might not be in the place where they can take that decision and enforce that, especially when they don't even know anyone there, that type of thing. Working in a hospital, generally, it's more autonomous. Generally, most people provide the biggest risk is busyness making you forget. but the facility and the ability to actually go out and pray, unless you're on the operating table, I think generally you're able to step outside for fact, which alhamdulillah is the biggest benefit. The even more to that, if my office or my kind of liver office where I sit is literally the prayer room is is the musalla is like literally like across the hall. It's literally right there. It's next door. And it's like the pharmacy department, all four floors, the on the basement, it merges into the prayer room. So
Alhamdulillah.
that is the biggest. That is the biggest nightmare from Allah. That is sick. But obviously, not everybody's going to be in a similar vein. But most hospitals, alhamdulillah, nowadays have prayer facilities. Most kind of big corporations have masses of boardrooms or meeting rooms that you can step into. So it shouldn't be difficult. I'd say it's more our community brothers that may find that one the most difficult. But generally, yeah, a lot of them have flexibility with their time, especially if they're locum in. You just don't work on a Friday, for example, stuff like that. And even Jummah as well. We've got a Jummah, like a mosque Jummah. That so, alhamdulillah, it is, especially in a hospital. You're good. You're good. A hospital is very conducive to practicing your religion,
Yeah.
I'd say, which is
Alhamdulillah.
alhamdulillah.
What are your working hours? Like, how does that work?
So when I was a junior, it was very much a 7 day kind of, generally 9 to 5, unless you're working a long day, which would be like and maybe you do one of these a week, which would be like a 9 to 9. And then the next day you do like a 5:30 p.m. to 9 a.m. You kind of go overnight. Somebody needs to be a night shift at all times. And originally, before we kind of made that system, it was you but 9 to 5:30, but every week you'd have to do, like, instead of finishing at 5:30, you'd finish at 12 o'clock the next day, which sounds weird because it sounds like you're working 27 hours, but that's what it was. You was working literally you could sleep if it was quiet, if your bleep wasn't going off. And at those times you could go home, but now you have to sleep in the hospital. But then nowadays, now I'm off that. It's just kind of 9 to 5:30 with sporadic weekends chucked in because yeah, you have less pharmacists working in the week. But there's 150 pharmacists and you only need about 30 for the week. So you can imagine you have to do for the weekend, sorry. You only need 30. So you can imagine the rota kind of working like
Yes.
that. So sometimes you end up doing Monday to Sunday, but generally Monday to Friday nights,
Okay,
30.
yeah, that's interesting. No, 'cause yeah, I never knew. I didn't really think how. That's what I imagine. Community is more based on when the things open and close.
It's not
But
open. That's
in
it.
hospital, yeah, so it can be 5 days, but you normally expect an odd weekend here. But when you're a junior, are you fully expecting to do 7 days?
You'll do so if you do a night, you'll have the day off after. It's kind of almost a bit like a nurse's kind of pattern, like long day, short days, long days, and nights kind of pattern. But to be fair, the whole 7 day NHS thing is coming, so that's going to sound different. In 5 years, it will be a nurse's long day, night shift type pattern. That's what it will be. But
Yeah,
yeah.
that's interesting. Yeah, deep in that. But I guess going like so, this is the part where we sort of talk a bit about a young person going through the journey now and trying to secure a role. So after you do the 4 year course, like as long as you do the placements and stuff like that, are you more or less guaranteed a role as a pharmacist, or do you are there things to apply for, like in terms of like how does one go about securing their first role, basically?
So at the end of uni, you have to kind of have if your uni allows you to graduate without having a pre-reg position booked, then your uni has done something crazy. So they are generally more, it's just about the quality of the position. So you may end up just working in some random pharmacy who just, for example, I'm not going to hire a staff member, I'll take this government grant and pay you with that. And then you'll just be working as the staff. So I'm not going to train you, you're just going to work as the person on the counter, for example. So that's worst case scenario. But everybody will have a position. Um, as a pre-reg, and then within that you can start applying for jobs. You might not get within the you job security and availability is generally very, very good. So it's very rare you'll see an unemployed pharmacist who's unemployed, like not by choice. It's because there's more work than pharmacists generally. And if you can't get a full-time post, locum, if you maybe just want to be one of those people that, you're always on the move, you're always driving. I'm in Southend today, I'm in Brighton tomorrow, I'm in Peckham on Wednesday, and I'm in Barking on Thursday. There are a lot of people that live that life, which can be a lot of the time the most lucrative life as well, especially if you're negotiating well and blah blah blah, in terms of pay. But But yeah, there's always, if not a job, there's a shift. That's I'll put it like that. If there's not a job, full-time job, there's a shift. But like I could easily probably change hospitals quite. I'd have to obviously do an interview and blah blah blah. But generally, getting a new job
Yeah.
would be fine. Moving up can be difficult, but can be difficult. But
No, it can be
yeah,
done. It sounds like there's, yeah, it sounds, it's pretty much,
yeah,
yeah,
it's nothing to worry
yeah.
about. Yeah, it's not.
Like you have to
Yeah,
like, really, really mess up to not, to not get
yeah.
a job, basically.
Yeah. If you want, it's one of the, yeah. If you want job security, you want, then pharmacists kind of obviously being a doctor, that you're good in terms of finding
Yeah.
work. And of course, I could go to Scotland and get a job. I mean, it's not going to be different. There's a hospital
Yeah.
everywhere. Everyone needs a hospital, so there's always going to be
Yeah.
work, which alhamdulillah is a benefit.
So if a, so say a young Muslim came to you and said, what key skills do I need to build to sort of succeed in this profession? And is there anything like they can maybe draw on, like any resources or anything you recommend for them to give like a head start? Or is it just generally like we sort of mentioned, like people skills, learning compassion, and things like that?
I literally do think the main things are, it's with a lot of these kind of healthcare roles, a lot of the time is which is probably leads to issues within the job, but generally make sure that your grades are what they need to be. That's your first one. And if you want to get a good role within it, then there's certain little things you can do in terms. It's funny because remember when I said that it's become more
Yeah.
centralized, the application process. What that's done is it's meant that a lot of the benefit in that, going meeting people, talking to people, getting this placement, securing this type of thing, a lot of that is kind of, I don't want to say gone out the window, but a lot of that isn't, the emphasis isn't on that as much because now it's a lot of time heavily based on your performance on an exam and one of those, what do you know, competency based interviews? Have you heard
Yeah.
of that?
Yeah.
So those type of interviews that they're not real interviews. They're not interviews about you. They're ticking box interviews. They're almost like verbal exams. So it's more of that. So which is a shame because a lot of, if this was 3 years ago or 5 years ago, what I would have said would be completely different. But what I'd say now is get your grades on point, and it all really starts from once you're in your pre-reg position. So once you're there, it's about what you're doing to kind of get your job, and that's when the advice would come in. So getting on the course, make sure your grades are fine. Going through uni, focus on your grades now. Just making sure that's all on point to put you in the best position to get the pre-reg you want when you apply. And then once you're in that pre-reg position, that's when the wheeling and the dealing starts, and that's when it becomes doing this, and this to make sure you're in a good position. So build relationships as early as you can. So that's why I guess doing those placements, there's no harm in it. If you want to work somewhere, like you want to work in a certain hospital, then work in that hospital, doing whatever you can, even if it's weekends, doing a counter work or just doing like a bit of work experience, that type of thing. It all helps because once your face is known, then you're good. It's amazing the amount of times people leave one job, go and do another job, and they're back. People, and they say it's a common term. Pharmacy is a very, very, very small
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
So the people I was at Kent Uni, the people I did my placement with, when I went to the hospital, when I met Ashraf, I met people I did placement with, like the people. It's a tiny world. People just keep cropping up. I remember you from here. So get your face out there. So put yourself where you want to be as quickly as
Yeah.
you
You
can.
done a lot
So
for like placements. Did you have to like? Is it? And you mentioned the part about centralizing. Is that sort of element centralized as well? How did you navigate the placement side of things? And is there anything you might have done that you think someone could learn from?
so I made sure that
Someone's
I
someone's on texting you, man.
so innit?
That's cool.
He wants his money. No, I'm joking. Um, um, yeah, making sure that placements, you have your kind of uni sanctioned placements, which are going to be a minimum. But like I said, those are going to be a minimum, and they're going to be probably around where your uni is. So you want to, so for a lot of people listening to this, for example, you might live in Manchester, but your home is in Southampton. So you probably more interested in Southampton than Manchester. So your uni is going to send you around Manchester, but that won't be. Pharmacy is a small world, but it's not always that small. So it's Manchester. So you need to get you so making sure that you're applying for these summer placements. And a lot of the time they're done as like rounds. So it's not like walking in handing a CV type thing. A lot of the time it's almost like applying for a job. So it's just making sure that you apply to these things as often as you can. So a lot of the time they give placements like the long placements to third years, but they let second years apply. So apply in second year because if you got a good application, they will remember you because it's probably going to be the same person reading the applications in a year's time. So and it will give you a better chance when you're in third year and they prefer third year. So little things like that, just making sure that you're in good positions. And the most important thing I'd say as well is that in pharmacy, because of the way I've explained it, you don't have the fact that you don't have to do much between college and finishing uni means that when it comes to applying for a job, or you don't have to do much variation of things to be able to apply. The entry level is quite samey. It means that everybody who applies is going to be quite samey. So what do you do to make yourself not the same? You you do different jobs. So I was my first job. I worked in Oval Cricket Ground. I was I started off as just like a housekeeper, and I ended up becoming like the supervisor of the housekeepers camp thing. And it was just working in test matches every summer, every Christmas holiday, that type of thing. And I also worked in security. And I worked for G First, got my license, and with all my friends, the most fun I've had like that is banter. Just working with your friends in like we did Wimbledon, we did Cheltenham Festival, like horse racing. We did all these like different summer festivals, blah blah blah. Sick, like so many memories, banter, like just
Yeah.
doing security with them and them. Some good money as well. But then the amount of stories or things you can reference back to in interviews and that you can put on your application that are just so mad that literally whenever I do an interview, everybody wants to talk about that. It's the things. Oh, you Wimbledon. Oh, what did you do there? Because it's so like the insight, little things you can do with, especially in security, is I would recommend security to everyone. Everyone. That's in uni trying to earn money because £10, £11, £12 an hour, 12-hour shifts, good money, not even have to do much, and it's fun as well. Especially you can do it with your boys, or you can do it with your sister's friends as well. Do that. I'd say do go for that, and it means that you're rounded because once again, what I said, you're working with everybody's got a story. You're working with so many different types of people that you just get so much insight and you just learn so many different things that you're not going to get to do when you're older, and it will benefit you so much. So like I'm still putting security, even in my senior pharmacist application, I'm still putting those stuff on my applications, and people still want to talk about it, and there's a reason. So everybody's going to be quite samey, but you always need new insight. So you're going to be the person who stands out in the room. So make sure that you're well-rounded. So take every opportunity and live life as much as you can when you're young, man. Do as many different things as you can because you're not going to get to do them or as much, or you might not get to do them as much when you're
When you're
when you're in that
working
rat
and
race.
married and yeah. We won't get any further.
And it's
Um,
a bit sad. Alhamdulillah, life's still good though. Life's still
no, but I
good.
think you make a good, really important point, and it's something that I've tried to emphasize as well is saying yes to opportunities. And part of saying yes to opportunities is looking for different ones. And you just mentioned yourself, having even stuff like security, that some people might dismiss that, but having different variety of things, like you said, it'll help you stand out. It gives you that bit of personality, it gives you a bit of edge, and it shows that you've liaised with different people, you met different people, you've worked with different people, you've been involved in like different events, and there's more variety in your sort of skill set
Mm-hmm.
than just like being a pure academic and getting the
Mm.
grades, which is part of it. But if you can add the variation, which it not only does it look good on the CV, but like you can testify this, bro. Like it does good for your personal development, character, personality, all that stuff as well. It all
Um,
comes into it. So nah, that's definitely going to be like a snippet that I'm going to make sure I post out because people need to do
nice.
that. People with that 100% can't not this time anyway. Maybe before you might be able to get away with it, but in this like current time where the market
You one dimension.
is more tough, you
Yeah.
need to like, sort of position yourself to be a bit more unique. But it's not hard. Like for Muslims, for example, the classic ones, youth work, charity, mosque work,
Charity.
they're
They're
easy
there.
given ones, and people can be
Yeah.
creative as well. They could find their own thing. But that's definitely useful advice. Have you been through any like of those competency interviews, or do you know what sort of competencies they ask for? If you don't, it's fine. But I'm just curious.
So I did. So when I applied, I said it's like almost like a doctor system, and then before it was like just a normal. When I applied, it was very much a hybrid. So a lot of the hospitals kind of grouped together to form their own little like general interview process. And the type of things they ask you. So from a pharmacy point of view, what they want to know is they want to know that you're safe to do so you know basic pharmacy skills, which are going to be kind of drug errors and maths calculations, and it's going to be things like knowledge of major so like policy that's going on within healthcare at the moment. So there's things like 7 day NHS. This wasn't a thing as when I was, but I'm sure that's the type of thing they're asking about. Um, efficiency in the hospital, and it like saving money within the NHS. So there's something called, like, for example, the Carter report, which very much heavily shapes how hospital pharmacy is now. In terms of using hospital pharmacists to save money for the NHS in general, blah blah blah. That type of thing will type of things they ask, but very much in a surface level. So it's not a deep level. It's just making sure that you're aware of all of those types of things, and as well as that, it's just going to be they want to know that you're fit for the job and that you've got experience that justifies that you can do the job. So it's making sure that whatever when you read the job spec or the person specification, that whatever example you're given, you're showing that you can, and you've got an example that clearly shows without too much explanation that you meet those requirements. So as much as I don't remember now specifically,
That's
sorry
fine.
about that. It will make sense that if you read the specification, it's about making sure that you've got examples that you can draw on that hit that specification, which is the same for most interviews, but in a way that they don't care too much about personality. So it's not about showing yourself as much as more about showing you tick those boxes, which obviously the easiest way to do it is by showing your personality in an interview. But they're not looking too much into that, because your personality unfortunately doesn't always, it might tick one box, but there's about 20 other boxes you need to. So,
Yeah, there's a lot of boxes, man. I was going to, so I'm coming up to the end, but one of the questions I normally ask is about sort of key reflections that you would share with young Muslims to help them position themselves to succeed in this sort of role generally. But I think you've sort of, in a way, covered that when I've asked like some of the other stuff. But I guess what I would ask in terms of like a final sort of question thing is key reflections, lessons, or advice that you would give to young Muslims, whether it's to succeed in this sort of role or generally. What would you what would you say to someone who asks you that?
I'd say the most important thing, and it's kind of going to echo something I've said, is firstly to just make yourself as a person as rounded as possible. So if you so Islamically, if you're Muslim or inshallah you're Muslim, you're making sure that your deen is in a good place, and making sure that you have a positive impact, or you have your positive influence on your community, making sure that you're giving back will give you that kind of power to raise yourself, so you can do that in a better way. So if you can make your motivations bigger than just filling your pockets, you'll see so much better results in what you're doing within your work. And if you can as well not be lazy, so make sure that you're rounded, different jobs, different work, doing different types of things, it will also enable you firstly to succeed at what you're doing, because it'll make you a better person, and better people tend to do better in career wise, and it will also enable you to be able to put you in a good position to make the most of new opportunities which develop, because we don't know. For example, I might not be there's a good chance I won't be a hospital pharmacist in 20 years, for example. I'll be very surprised if that happens. So it's about placing yourself and making sure that you're able to seize these opportunities. And another thing is more of a practical thing. Make sure your IT skills and your tech skills are as good as they can, because the world is those you can't get away from it. So make sure that you're good with all of that, because you don't want to fall over because of things like that, and that can happen. So making sure that you're in a good place with all that type of things, and just kind of have fun in whatever job you're doing, and don't see it as everything. Make sure that your life's good, and your job should inshallah follow.
Inshallah, that was good advice, bro. And there's a lot of rounded things there, but I think overall, it's like making sure that you're developing yourself overall and making Deen the anchor of that. Because I mean, but Islam is amazing, man. And I remember when I spoke to him on our show, and he's like, the ultimate development tool is Islam, and we talk about Islam, talk about excellence. Like it's there, man.
Excellent.
It's literally it's there. Sometimes we just dismiss it to like Salah and you know reading Quran and Zakat and just those like basic five pillars. But as a person,
Yeah.
as a member of society, as a sibling, as a in the community, in the family, and it's interesting because when you look into anything, how can I develop these skills? And align it with your deen, you find it empowering as well. Like I think when I've started to discover that, wow, you know what I do in my job can be a form of ibadah. How I treat someone, how I maybe good manners or help someone with the issue is an ibadah. And if I can sort of align these things to what I'm doing, whether that's in my sort of main profession or outside of work, podcast or anything else, then with the right intention, it can be of benefit. And if the right intention is on point, then you gain the barakah from it. Then the barakah is going to be the key element that's going to bless every part of it, man. Yeah, but bro, Jazakallah khair, man, for joining. And I know you're wearing a Liverpool shirt, but I'm going to be compassionate and I'm not going to judge you on this particular era. To be fair, I support Arsenal, so I'm a bit worse.
Yeah, I'm a gab. I don't know. A week is a long time in football, and 6 months is a long time. Yeah, when I bought this shirt, it meant something. Not anymore, boy.
It could be worse, man. You could buy a football shirt, and the next day your team loses 8-2. I'm buying that shirt with my Eid money, and I didn't wear it for months after that. Let's just say that. Let's just say that. But
this game is too painful sometimes.
Yeah. To be fair, I feel like I've learned a lot of valuable lessons that I can apply in my career, man. Is never to be too emotionally attached.
Emotionally attached, man.
That's the key thing.
I'm learning that. I'm going through that process now, so I'll let you know when I'm on the other side.
I pray you find your way, man. But bro, Jazakallah khair, man, for joining. I think this is going to be very interesting. Doorbell's ringing. Very interesting for people that are interested in this career, and even just generally, like hearing your story, like the way you've approached things, your mindset, and making it sort of with the focus of deen is like the key essence of what I'm looking for in terms of like giving these stories to young Muslims to look at and know that it's possible for them to achieve as well, and it's possible for them to not have to compromise their deen in any way, and instead draw on the barakah, draw on the blessings from Allah, was to do everything in your career or outside, and the success inshallah will follow with the right intention and the sincere effort. But aside from that, man, I think I'm gonna. It's lovely speaking to you. I'm gonna make sure that everything was all good for this recording. But with that, bro, is there any final words or anything you want to refute me about for supporting Arsenal?
Jazakallah khair for having me, man. And I think I said at the beginning, but I pray Allah blows up this platform, man, because it's sick. What you're doing is sick, man, and Allah reward you for it abundantly, man. And keep going, man. Keep going. Keep pushing it, man.
Man. Keep me in the doors, bro.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I will, inshallah, man. I will.
With that, bro. Assalamu alaikum.
Thanks, sir. To love, man. Take care.